Once Cyberpunk was announced and the hype started to pump some people up, I also joined that hype train. The idea of a world like Cyberpunk 2077 was something never before seen at the time. However, when the launch date came closer, my excitement dwindled more and more. Cyberpunk 2077, without a doubt, had one of the worst launches ever seen in gaming history. From a ton of glitches, constant game crashes, hardware issues, and even PlayStation removing the game from their store showed how rocky the game release was. Even through all this though, I recently finished the game, 2 years after its release date. Before the launch date, I did pre-order the game and I did try to play it when it came out, but I couldn't be bothered trying to play it due to the many bugs and the many crashes I received. This year, however, I saw the Edge Runner series from Netflix had an effect on the player count and brought many new players to experience the game for itself. From the player spike and the many videos on how to make certain character builds in the game, Edge Runners definitely played a role in reviving the game a bit. So, knowing this, the Netflix show wasn't the reason why I started doing a playthrough of the game, despite it having this effect on some other people. The reason why I started playing the game was pretty simple. I spent money on the game, I won't let it go to waste. Going into this review, these are just my opinions, and I don't want my opinions to tarnish your view of the game before you even give the thing a chance. So, if you have any way of getting the game, I encourage you to do a playthrough yourself before watching this video, and let me know what you think about it in the comments. I would love to hear them. Now, without further ado, this is an actual review on Cyberpunk 2077. When you first start playing the game, you are greeted with a plethora of things to do. This for me was genuinely overwhelming and made me feel the same way whenever I tried playing Skyrim. This did change, however, and I finally got a feel for the game and how it worked. It just took a while. The body modifications and the skill branch systems were probably the most confusing for me, as I didn't really know what to go for. Body modifications such as cyberware and the skill branch system make your player stronger the more XP you receive. So I tried to balance things out and tried to keep things even or equal. Later in the game, however, I noticed that this was not how the game wanted you to play it. The reason being, character builds. Basically, you can try to equalize as many skills as you can, but in the end this is pointless considering in late game you have to meet certain requirements in order to do certain things, like opening doors or hacking into databanks and computers. Your character level is also capped at level 50, meaning when you reach that point, you can't get any more skill points in your campaign. I also learned this when I was in a late game during my playthrough. For example, I was trying to get the Sandevistan body modification, which again is a part of a character build from the Netflix series. But in my venture of acquiring this device, I found out I had to have a ridiculous level of reflexes in order to use the thing. I of course thought I had to even things out with my skills, as the only body requirements I saw in the game were level requirements, not skill requirements. So, you have to be careful about what you want and don't regret it. As for the combat, it can be played two different ways. 1. Go all out and annihilate every enemy that walks into your eyesight. Or 2. Play it stealthily. Pick off your targets one by one, avoid getting caught, and leave as if nothing happened. When I went through my playthrough, I went for the more stealthy route, and to be fair, I pulled off some sick stuff and it made me actually feel like a badass. However, the stealth route was probably the main reason why it took me longer to finish the game. When you stealth, you have to be careful of everything that you do, and I mean everything. You have to keep out of the way of cameras, objects that can make noise, and of course, enemies. The hardest part would probably be looking out for enemies, because they will not be located on the map unless you are 10 feet away from them, and this cost me many stealth gigs and I had to restart every time. This is because the game encourages you to go stealth, especially in gigs. Gigs are basically your side quests for the many kingpins within Night City, and are one of your main resources for eddies, the currency in the game. When you stealth, you get a major bonus in the end, and eddies are obviously the most important thing in the game because they allow you to buy things. As for the assault route, the combat is pretty fun. The game gives enemies different abilities that change the game up. That way it doesn't feel like an average first-person shooter. Along with that, the cyberware mods that you apply to your character change the way you fight through your enemies. Cyberware mods, such as the Sandevistan, allow you to slow down time, in which you can pull off some pretty badass moves, kind of like you're the Flash. There's also a vast selection of weapons you can use for combat, such as rifles, pistols, blades, blunt weapons, and more, with each weapon having something special about them. When you fight, use everything that you have at your disposal to guarantee you a successful victory. Now while the combat is nice, I do want to talk about the driving, because there are a ton of cars you can have at your disposal, with the faster cars costing an arm and a leg. And the amount of detail within these cars is honestly insane. They look so cool to look at. As for the driving, it's just alright. I noticed that a lot of the control of the car feels like it's coming from the back of the car instead of the front. I know that sounds weird, but that is generally how it felt to me. Along with this, there are some problems with parts of the road and its collision, especially in the Badlands. Basically, there are some parts of the terrain that act as a damage indicator, meaning even if you have an off-road vehicle for the Badlands, the collision will absolutely bang up your car. So unless if you have some missions that are in the Badlands, I advise you drive carefully. Now, we are in the second to last segment, and probably the most prevalent part within the Cyberpunk game. I'm talking about the glitches. When I did my playthrough of the game, I experienced many bugs, some less severe than others. I will try to provide as much footage of these occurrences as possible, as I am making this script after my playthrough, and I did not record anything at the time to save some frames. So with that notion, just trust me as I go through the glitches that don't have any footage, I guess. So for starters, probably the most annoying glitch was when cars would just randomly spawn inside of my parked car. I think I have a few basic ideas of why this occurs. Number one being sometimes when you go a little bit too fast, the game has a hard time rendering, so it takes a little bit for everything to load in correctly. This can cause a lot of the enemies to look like PS2 models, and textures looking blurred out. But nonetheless, after a while, a car will just randomly spawn inside your car, causing a bunch of collisions to occur, obviously. All the other glitches are pretty tame, from things randomly flinging to random flickers in the sun. The only major bug that I experienced was probably a bug that didn't allow me to save. I do not have any footage of this, but what happened was I finished a side job for one of the story's characters. Afterward, I was soft locked and the game did not allow me to save, after 20 minutes of doing other side jobs. I decided to just leave the game and then come back, but afterward, all of my saves were missing. Alright, I just wanted to pause real quick because I ran into another bug. So, the game wasn't launching on their launcher. So the way that it works is Steam is supposed to launch their launcher, and then you select the game, and then you play the game. But what it does is that it loads up the launcher and then instantly closes it, and then it just doesn't open. It took me a while, but I finally found some support, and I did send them an email. I can still play the game. If I go to the actual installation folder on Steam, and I go to the Cyberpunk, and I can launch it from their red launcher, or I can even go to the bin and even open up the application of the game itself. So that's kind of annoying. I did try my drivers are all fine, my Windows update is fine. I even uninstalled the game, reinstalled it, I even validated the files twice, still having the same issue. So what I am doing is I just contacted support. Again, it did take a while, I didn't see it at first, but they do have their own customer support line on their technical website. I couldn't see it because it was such in a weird place. But yeah, that is the only other bug that has happened so far, and it's kind of annoying considering that this hasn't done this before, and I've had the game for 3 years. So hopefully it can get fixed. I don't know if it's on Steam's side or their side, but I guess I will find out. I won't give any update in this video. That's just another thing to add on to this thing, because this has started happening as I was making this video. Anyway, back to the video. Since we are reaching this part of the video, I just want to put a disclaimer just in case, mainly because this will be my shortest segment and I'm not going to talk much on the story itself. So, this is the point of no return. Minor spoilers ahead. The only thing that I'm going to say is that most of the endings involve losing something. Again, I'm not going into detail on what happens to get you these endings, but the many diverse characters that you meet along the way are so thought out. The fact that there are this many characters is honestly insane to me, and each person has their own story, and funnily enough, some of these characters can help you get the ending that you can receive. All in all, the story is alright, but the most interesting part in the story are definitely the characters. So as I stated before, Cyberpunk was a game that had a very rocky start. The amount of glitches and bugs caused the game to be run into the ground by a lot of players. But looking at it now with a new perspective and a tolerance to actually fix the game is pretty good. It isn't up there completely, but it's definitely a game that you should definitely try out. Playing this game made me realize just how good of a story Cyberpunk had, and the diverse amount of characters holds that story up very well. Although there are still some issues that need to be fixed with the game, they are a lot more tame than they were 2 years ago. With a new DLC on its way, Phantom Liberty, I really hope that CD Projekt Red learns from the mistakes that they made in the past, and still strive to improve on the game. Because in reality, Cyberpunk has such a great universe and so many different concepts, and I would love it if they expanded on the universe along with fixing more of the game. So, with all that in mind, Cyberpunk gets a solid 7 out of 10 for me. I will review Phantom Liberty once it releases, but until then, there will be more videos on the way, so please stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching, you guys are amazing.
I can't believe how much I hate pressures of a new place roll my way. Jump to